What are they? Who are they? I'm sure many of you have heard of these black-eyed beings approaching people, begging to be let into their homes. They don't know the sinister side to these innocent-looking beings pretending to be children. Tonight, we're going to look at 7 encounters of children with blackened eyes. Story 1. It happened in the woods. So, my story is one of the black-eyed children, and I feel like I'm finally ready and safe enough to share it, as it's been almost a few months now. The events happened in the following order. My friend and I were always big into the paranormal and exploring haunted places. One night, we decided to go out to the woods in the current state I live in and go to an abandoned camp that was used during World War II to keep the Japanese prisoners. I forgot the proper name of what they were called, those camps, but I remember that was what he told me it was. It was miles away from where I live and deep along these winding dirt roads, something both he and I were very concerned about. My sister was with us at the time, but I don't think they saw what I did. It was getting dark. It was around 7 p.m. that time, and we thought it would be perfect to go searching for cryptids. Very stupid, I know. As it fascinated us though, and we were just kids, you know? I thought we wouldn't find anything, as I was a strong believer in the paranormal. So we're driving down the dirt road, and I feel my whole body involuntarily go rigid, like it stiffened up all the way to my joints. I'm in my early 20s, so this was a very strange experience for me, but I dismissed it. As soon as we passed the water, so did the feeling. It went to the ball of my hands and into my fists, and my hands cracked, almost as if I'd been sitting still for decades. This is where I wish I made him turn around. I got this feeling like I was being watched and turned my head to look out the window and look into the forest while he and my sister got out of his Jeep. Searching for what it was I couldn't see. Shrugging it off and dismissing it, I stepped out of the car, thinking it to be my overactive imagination or maybe my ADHD playing up on me. God, I honestly wish it had been. We decided to search for the remains of that camp. The one I mentioned earlier, and that is when he heard it. He heard multiple voices, or so he claimed. I did too, and the only noise was the soft breathing coming from my sister, my friend, and myself. The silence was so eerie too, like there was something smothering any sound with a blanket of nothing. Thinking about it now honestly gives me the creeps. I keep beating myself up over it because I should have known. My ex lurched up and said we needed to go. He just said we had to go now. I brandished his pocket knife and told my twin to get in front of me and to move. That was when I made the mistake of looking behind me and seeing 2 boys standing at the edge of the water, back at me. I squinted to look at them, and I will never forget what I saw next. One of them turned to look at me with those eyes. It didn't look like there was anything there, and if it weren't for that intense fear I felt when looking into that void, I would have sworn it was just because it was dark. I snapped back to what I was doing and stood defensively as I made my way back up the hill, the staring sensation intensifying. I felt worse and I felt like I was being followed. Looking to my sister, I told her to get into the car. She took her time and I told her to hurry the hell up. My ex-friend climbed in and we took back off, that sensation following me through the woods until we got back onto the main road. Story 2. My first encounter. I'm a believer in many things paranormal, with BEKs being one of the stories I thought was urban legend until early this morning. I'm the assistant manager of the Pizza Hut in my town, and my GM has me on the late night shift, so he doesn't have to anymore. It was a little after 2 a.m., and around that time is when the external lights of the building cut off, leaving the parking lot almost pitch black. The driver and I were in the very back of the store finishing up dough prep and dishes as we normally do. I like to say that I am an attuned person to the paranormal since I have witnessed many things throughout my 21 years of existing on this planet. While we were in a conversation about sales and what to prep, I started to feel unnerved. I ignored it due to anxiety and stressing over a homeless man making a scene a couple hours prior to close. but the feeling didn't go away. So I made a patrol around the restaurant. I looked out the front doors first, since the highway gives out front a little bit of light, but there was nothing. I looked out the windows in the dining room, but still nothing. It wasn't until I decided to look out the drive-through window that I saw it. Standing about 3-ish yards away from the window was a girl in a dress, barely illuminated by the lights that were still cooling down outside. She was pale and had hair that fell just past her shoulders. As an adult, my first thought was, what is that kid doing out in 34-degree weather in the pouring rain? But then our eyes met, and I saw that hers were a jet black color. I recoiled from the window and ran over to the safe to get my phone out. We had to keep our phones locked up during business hours, and I don't have to have my phone glued to me 24/7, so I normally just leave it in there until I need it. By the time I got it out and ran back to the drive-thru, she wasn't there, and I didn't see her again for the entire time we were there. I know the stories say they come to the doors of homes and try to get in. As long as you don't invite them in, you're fine. But she just stood there and then vanished. I'm still on edge from the whole situation. The believer of the paranormal in me also makes me wonder if it could have just been a spirit, which scares me even more. My first encounter with a demon was one that portrayed itself as a child. So who knows? I just had to post my story somewhere. My girlfriend thinks I'm crazy, and my general manager, who also believes in things such as this, is now freaking the hell out. Story 3. I don't understand. So, I'll start off by saying I am 14 years old. I'm from a hilled village in England, and recently I have been doing a project on urban legends. The assignment was set to do in class. Most people did Bloody Mary, and I personally did Slender Man. I've experienced many paranormal things throughout my life. I even knew a person who died after what's assumed to be possession. This is a whole new level for me because it's not just normal spirits that I encountered every so often. This is something entirely new, a creature that resembles a human, but isn't. Anyway, I'll get back to why my school project is relevant. There were 2 students which did black-eyed children, also known as black-eyed kids, or BEC or BEK. This was cool, and when it came to presenting, I started to feel sick and my stomach started churning. I just thought I had a sickness bug, so I asked to go to the reception and ended up passing out on my way. My mom took me to a doctor to see if there was anything seriously wrong, but the doctor just said it might be a viral infection. It was probably just a coincidence, but I just feel like it could have been something else. Go forward 2 weeks later exactly, and I was walking my dog Marley. I was going through the woods since there's a thin path that leads through to a golf course surrounded by wooded hills. I was walking through there with my dog when suddenly it started getting chilly and a bit windy. A bit of gravel flew in my eyes, and that was when I realized there was someone on the path in a white dress covered in mud. It was a girl, and I noticed as I walked further that she had really pale skin. I was about 3 meters away from her when all of a sudden my dog cowered away. I stopped and I tried to calm him, but no matter what I did, he wouldn't go further. The girl was facing the other way, and it wasn't until I actually went to tap her on the shoulder that I realized she was only about 12. I hesitated, and as I went to tap her, she turned her entire body around in a very shifty movement. She turned her head first and did the same with the rest of her body, ending with her feet. It gave me shivers, and I stuttered as I spoke to her. Her eyes were black and looked like marbles. I was asking, are you okay? But before I could finish my sentence, she asked, "Can I touch your dog?" It actually would have made me giggle if I wasn't so shaky. She was so direct with everything she asked. I said no, and she kept asking, "Can I touch your?" with each of my items, and eventually she asked to hold my hand. It took me by surprise, so obviously I said no. This is where it got confusing. She started bawling her eyes out, talking about how she needed to hold my hand. I eventually started running away, and that's when she actually started crawling over to me and tried touching my dog. Marley at this point was literally wincing from fear. I looked back behind me, and all I saw was the girl on the ground pulling at her hair, and that's when she suddenly disappeared. I looked back a second time, and it looked like she was literally sinking into the ground. She was just going down. I ran home, and ever since then, I haven't experienced anything else. I also haven't been anywhere near the path when walking my dog again. Story 4. We are suffering. This happened a couple of weeks ago when myself and two of my partners, who will be referred to as K and W, decided on visiting this 150-year-old graveyard at night. Now, I'm a sensitive empath, indigo, whatever. W and K are blocked off energy-wise. The walk in the cemetery was dark and peaceful at first. We wandered a while and read some stones, and eventually, at a crossroads, K noticed something and walked off. He came back and whispered, "There's someone over there. I'm gonna go check it out." The moment he walked away, I felt eyes watching me from everywhere and an overwhelming primal sense of fear. I froze, and W strained to see what K was looking at. About 7 or 8 minutes later, K was back and looking spooked. He told me that there was a stone white figure darting through the trees. I was asked if I wanted to leave, and I said no. So we stayed and wondered a little more. After a little longer, we came across this huge marble mausoleum, the door of which was made of glass and you could see through it. Getting closer set me off. Everything felt wrong and the dread was back. There was an extremely prickly feeling all over my skin. Kay touched the door and felt it too. Both Kay and myself saw a shadow moving around inside the mausoleum as we stood there, and the moment he touched the door, the shadow then disappeared. We ran, eventually finding a place to sit for a moment. I was completely overwhelmed and it continuing to feel like we were being watched. Kay was really freaking out, getting dizzy and very quiet. He seemed really off, like he'd seen something I hadn't. I was asked again if I wanted to leave, and this time I said yes. We left, and the whole walk home, myself and Kay felt the dread again. That inhuman primal fear. Once we got home, W immediately fell asleep on the couch, while Kay and I began to panic. Both of us felt extremely dizzy and weak, and then knocking. It started softly, only 3. As time went on, it got more and more frantic sounding, but not much harder. We couldn't shake the dread for a good 30 or so minutes. When the dread left, we were left drained mentally and physically and decided on going upstairs and attempting to get some sleep. We assured each other that if it was a black-eyed kid, that we didn't open the door and thus we were safe. At some point while watching TV to try and calm down, I got overheated and Kay opened the door to the upstairs patio and turned on the fan. That was another thing we did wrong. Around 3:20 in the morning, Kay woke up and he remembers only being able to move his head around. The door had opened on its own, about halfway, and a child who looked about 12 with extremely messy short hair and face covered by a shadow was standing there, staring. He remembers the most intense terror he has ever felt, so much that it physically hurt. He shut his eyes and held them closed until the terror passed, and he fell back asleep. The house was already haunted, which is a different story entirely, but the activity has been kicked up a notch or two. The cat goes nuts because of it. And since then, for both me and Kay, depression and anxiety has become much more intense than it ever has been in a long time. I can't sleep at night, and neither can Kay. There has been a constant dull ringing in my ears. Occasionally dread so bad it hurts will take over Kay for 20 to 30 minutes at a time. And I've been having random pains in various parts of my abdomen. TVs, radios, and lights turn on and off by themselves, and we are both constantly feeling watched and intense fear. I can't find any sources on how to deal with it or get rid of black-eyed children. I also practice witchcraft, and nothing I've done, casting circles, salt, cleansing, has worked. Whatever black-eyed children are, whatever they want is having effects on our physical and mental health. I feel so drained. Someone tell me what to do, please. Story 5. My story. I don't believe what I saw was a black-eyed child, as its behaviors were very different than a black-eyed child, but this may still be interesting for all of you to know. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've had multiple experiences with a person with the void eyes, as I call them. The one I remember well had some long-term effects. I hope yours didn't. I was 11 years old, and I had woken up early, around 6 a.m. It was during the summer at this point, so daylight was quite visible in my house. Groggy and tired, I walked out of my room and down to the first floor, not really thinking about much. I then stop at the foot of the stairs, as I feel something is watching me. I look up and see a girl in a white, ragged dress with messy black hair partially covering her face. I could see one thing that scared me though. Those eyes. The void that they were, empty and infinite. That is what scared me the most. I ran to the bathroom nearby and slammed the door shut. After looking at the mirror, I passed out. I woke up at some point later and the girl was gone. After that, I've been prone to passing out and have been dealing with it for the past 7 years. The effects have faded with time, but they are still there. I have seen her a number of times, 4 that I could recall off the top of my head, and my little brother has also seen her. I've also seen her in different forms. Be careful out there. On my end, it seems as if not showing fear and directly challenging them will make them go away. Considering that the last time I saw her, I stared right back and directly challenged her. I haven't seen her since, and I'm unsure if she'll ever come back. Story 6. I saw one while working. I had something happen to me at work. I was on lunch, sitting outside at the smoke area, vaping. I was sitting at a wooden table. Me and 2 other people. This girl was there too. She was sitting across from me and sideways. I thought it was funny because it looked like she had black eyes. I used to joke with myself that black-eyed children can't enter the smoke area outside of work because of our turnstiles they would have to enter first. I blew a huge cloud and it was so close to her she dodged it. As she got up to leave, I apologized to her and it sounded like she whispered in my ear. It startled me and I spun around and she was gone. She couldn't have just left my line of sight that quick. I told the guy at the table I must have ran her off. He was just looking at me with huge eyes. I asked him if he was okay, and he said there was nobody ever sitting there. Story 7. Feeling tremendous dread. I've heard stories of black-eyed children over recent years. Some of them are just downright creepy. I'm a sensitive. I do my best to be aware and focused. So if I'm in danger, my intuition goes on red alert. With that being said, I'd like to share something interesting that happened to me. During the most recent New Year's Eve, my son, myself, and my fiance had quite a night at home. We watched movies, made dinner. My son went to bed fairly early since he was only 5 years old. No wild parties or anything. We were marathon watching Netflix while laughing, chatting in the master bedroom. Well after midnight. At which point there was a confident, solid knock at our front door. Boom, boom, boom. We live in the country and it's a bit more remote. All of our neighbors were friendly enough, but they wouldn't have knocked this late as it would be perceived as rude. Our Jeep was parked in the garage, so it wouldn't be related to a car having lights left on, etc. I'm listing this cause that happened once. The keys to the Jeep and the house were securely hung in place. The fun time we were having quickly shifted to an odd feeling of confusion, coupled with unusual terror. It was really odd. We aren't fearful people. We simultaneously checked our smartphones for anyone stopping by unannounced. Nothing. Except a few well-wishing friends text due to it being New Year's Eve and all. I get up to stretch and my fiance made sure I wasn't about to answer the door. Hell no, I said. We laughed uncomfortably. I joked with him saying, "'Cause you were going to," I teased. He scowled and then smiled, knowing full well he would have normally. Why were we so on edge? We both remarked how odd we felt about the knock and the late hour. In fact, we didn't budge from the master bedroom. Neither of us felt good about checking the door and figured whomever it was had the wrong house. 2 to 3 minutes had passed, and yet another knock. Boom, 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 boom. We were getting agitated, and that strange feeling of terror was back, strong as ever. I've never felt that way about someone knocking on the door before, nor have I never not felt safe to answer. It was so odd. I'll paint a more clear picture for you. Good neighborhood, our front porch light bulb needed to be replaced, so it was dark as hell out there. I thought it was really weird that someone would be standing out there in complete pitch black darkness for 3 minutes, knocking like that. I mentioned this to my fiance. The peephole would give us away if we stole a look, since lights were on throughout the house. We didn't dare check. Why? That senseless feeling of fear was disabling. It made so, two grown very capable at defending ourselves adults were essentially cowering in fear after 2 knocks at the front door late at night. What gives? It took about a half hour, but I eventually felt a lot better. No longer felt afraid, and felt that whomever was had left. I checked the front of the house through the kitchen window. No cars, no neighbors, no parties, just the calm sound of crickets. I checked the front of the house through the kitchen window. No cars, no neighbors, no parties, just the calm sounds of crickets. I proceeded to open the front door after listening to make absolutely certain no one would surprise me, like a drunk ex-boyfriend passed out on the porch or something equally hilarious. Satisfied, I opened the front door. It was quiet. In fact, too quiet. No crickets or sounds at all. That's odd, I thought. I had a feeling instantly of being watched. From where? Who? What? I got the chills and shut the door, then armed the alarm system. I thought to myself, if they come back, we can call to report suspicious activity to the police. However, it then occurred to me that we wouldn't get through. It was New Year's Eve, after all. Awesome, right? Even to me, it sounds like I'm overly paranoid and getting spooked for no reason. I would think the same thing had it not happened to me. When the second knock took place, for a split second I thought, oh shit, what if? Regarding the black-eyed kid stories I've read. Mainly, it was the remarkable senseless fear we felt that tipped me off. My son slept through it. No, I didn't share this epiphany with my fiance at the moment. We were too terrified to make any noise. He's legitimately a skeptic. He doesn't know anything about black-eyed children, and I wasn't about to go into it at the same time. He shared that there was no way in hell he was answering the door, and I thought his reaction was odd, especially since he didn't know any of the black-eyed children's stories. During this ordeal, the doorbell wasn't used at all. What's strange is that the only light in the porch area would have been illuminating the button for the doorbell. Why wasn't the doorbell pushed? No porch light out there. It had burned out. It was at height which needed a ladder to reach it. During the busy holidays, we hadn't gotten around to replacing the light bulb yet. It was on our list of things to do. It was moved to the top of the list after this experience. It was super late at night also, since I've lived here for 8 years. As an example, the only time our door was ever knocked on super late at night was a friendly neighbor letting us know that I had left my truck door open when we had unloaded groceries. He announced himself as he was knocking, saying who he was and why he was knocking. Before we even reached the door back then. We were grateful for his concern, and that was the only time it had happened. It's a good neighborhood. What's interesting is that with my previous knowledge of black-eyed children encounters, that occurred to me during this experience, so I stayed put. There was no way I was going to check out who was there, just to be certain. It's super important to express that the immense fear I felt was paralyzing. I truly feel for anyone who has had the displeasure of experiencing black-eyed children. If that isn't what was on the porch, then it was something equally as terrible. It's also important to share this tidbit. I'm not a person who's normally fearful of much. Honestly, there is danger in just about everything. However, that doesn't stop me from daily adventures, and I'd rather enjoy life than live in fear. I'm a streetwise female who is always aware of her surroundings. as well as I'm a survivor of a home invasion too. Interestingly enough, when someone tried to rob me years prior, they were discovered in my kitchen when I was getting a quick glass of water before bed. We hadn't been home for even 2 minutes. I kept a Brita in the fridge to keep cold filtered water. When I opened the fridge, the light illuminated the kitchen well enough so I could see a man standing in my kitchen corner. As unnerving as that was, I wasn't afraid. Fight kicked in versus flight, and all I did was look straight at this man and say, "Get out." I walked toward him with purpose and he fled. I wasn't harmed. He ran from the house. My then boyfriend was also amazed at my bravery. I've been trained in self-defense and have taken martial arts for years. So there you have it. Sometimes people fall in hard times and take desperate measures to rob others. With this experience that I've described, my instincts were going nuts. It was so terrifying that I wanted to share this with the community as a helpful way to warn others. If you have someone knocking late at night and it's followed by a similar feeling of overwhelming dread, simply trust yourself. Don't go near the door, nor could I, no matter what. That dreadful feeling was so pronounced. Our instincts are there to keep us safe, so trust that feeling. It's there to keep you all safe. Don't second guess yourself. Final thought. I have no idea what the black-eyed children are, or whatever they may be. I definitely believe that they mean harm. My curiosity to initially look into the black-eyed encountered stories is perhaps what helped save me from a full-blown encounter. I'm very thankful for that. Being informed is perhaps our best defense. I'll be soon sharing a more detailed story about an unsafe experience I had while reading electric and gas meters in a neighborhood in Northern California. The gas meter was behind a cyclone fence, and I'd read it a number of times, since it was on my regular route string. I could tell that new cars were parked out front of it, so it occurred to me that new tenants were possibly living at the house. Not uncommon. What I didn't consciously register was that what was peeking out from the other side of the house. As I walked past the front to read the gas meter, when I popped open the cyclone fence gate, it was like I hit an invisible brick wall. I was physically stopped from walking forward. Startled, I tried to walk forward again. Our routes are timed, so I didn't essentially have time to waste. It was bizarre. I had the hair on my arms and the back of my neck standing up. I couldn't physically enter the yard. I tried several times. Some invisible force was literally stopping me. What did I see on the other side of the house?